Good to good to see you. We'll give folks a minute to join. Um, as folks are joining, we just wanted to highlight a couple of events, webinars that are happening. So Mass Taxpayers is Victoria is going to do an overview of the fiscal year 26 governor's proposal. And then next week on February 12th, Strategies for Children in Neighborhood Villages are organizing an event to kind of talk about the budget, go through it, think about what it might mean, think about advocacy for next steps. So we'll put those links in chat. And we talked as a team last week at Strategies for trying to figure out the best way to keep up to date accurate information that people can access. So we are going to think about, we have a template for a spreadsheet that you can kind of list links and sources and dates. So we're going to keep it internal just to see kind of what resources we need to keep that going and keep it accurate. But we're hoping to kind of have that kind of resource for folks as, decisions are getting made or not made, or there's confusion about what's happening, as we saw all from last week about the memos and the federal funding. So we just want to make sure that we're finding ways to um, that folks can have accurate information, can have access to that. So stay tuned for that. Um, and then this week on the 9:30 call, hopefully you saw, today we're so excited to have the team with us to talk about the work between the Office of Child Advocate and EEC. And then next week, excuse me, and then tomorrow, I can't, of course, pull it up, so I'll put it in the chat. But we're almost booked all the way through February, so we're booking March and April. We will also highlight members of our advocacy network, and you'll also hear from our interns here. So with that, I will turn it over to the team, to Alex, Audrey, and Joy. You should be able to share your screen if you have slides. But as you know, the first question in the 9:30 call is for each of you to tell us about you, how you came to be in your current role, and then we look forward to hearing your update. One more note, we sent with the email this week that anytime someone shows slides on the call, we always post them in our follow-up folders. So we put the links for all of that. So we have the slides, we have any resources, any links that folks show, and then all the recordings are on our YouTube channel in the playlist for 9:30 call. Now we can see the notes as well for the slides. So
I'll let Joy start adjusting that.
okay,
And while she does that, I'll kick off with how we
great.
came to do this work. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to Aimee and everybody who is on this call, who let us be on this call. I want to start out by really appreciating every single person that is on this call as we kick off our Street Week. That looks great, Joy. Thank you. STREET stands for our Strategic Trauma Responsive Early Education Training, and we're going to talk about all the trauma responsive resources we are putting out there. And it's the perfect way to start by talking about myself. I started as an early childhood educator. I realized that was an impossibly hard, challenging job. And so I moved to a much easier one when I sit behind a computer. But I'm very lucky to be able to be the executive director of the Center on Child Wellbeing, which is housed in the Office of the Child Advocate. Momentarily, I will go into a little bit about the OCA and a little bit about this work. But I first want to give a shout out to my team that is on the call. Everybody on my team, wave if you're not actually speaking. Alix did a huge amount of work for the LMS training, which is now released for every early childhood educator. My team from the Center on Child Wellbeing and Trauma is involved in pretty much every single aspect of all of the things that you are going to hear about. So we are really excited to join you. I will also share that I am the descendant of Holocaust survivors. So it is very important to me that everything that we do is based not only in trauma responsiveness, but in equity. So you will see that lens coming through in all of our trainings as well. So before we formally dive in, I will let you know that I was working with my child this weekend who had to memorize a poem. I'm going to read you guys the last lines of the poem and see if anyone can guess what this poem, who wrote this poem and what it's about. And it is actually related to the training stuff that we're about to hop into. So the poem ends, "Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" So if anybody happens to know who the author of that poem is, you can put it in the chat. I will share with you that the reason I'm introducing it to us today is because, yes, Mary Oliver, the beloved and amazing Mary Oliver. So I think all of you all made a choice to spend your wild and precious life advocating for other children, coming up with strategies to support children, and potentially supporting the most vulnerable among us. And I am so grateful that I get to spend some of the morning with you today, telling you the small piece that we are doing to try to use our wild and precious lives to move things forward to be trauma responsive for kids. So with that, Joy, if you can kind of click on the first slide, and I'm going to have Joy and our partner at EEC, the amazing other Aimee, we call her. Obviously, if you're Aimee, you do amazing things for children. So I'm going to let Joy and Aimee Smith-Zeoli introduce themselves when it comes to their work on the slides. I'm going to kick off with an overview of the Office of the Child Advocate. We are relatively new to state service. We've been established in 2008. The goal was to have an oversight agency that partners across secretariats and works with every agency that supports child serving and family serving entities. So anyone who is a public agency or the contracted services who work for children is in the purview of what the child advocate likes to support. And the goal really is a goal that I think we all share, which is that every single child has the opportunity to live a full and productive life. So the office is broken out to 3 divisions. One is the Center on Child Wellbeing and Trauma. You're going to hear about that today. Another one is the Policy Implementation Team. That's what ELEACS belongs to. And there's another group that does quality assurance. They also run a complaint line so that any child or family that is involved with state systems, if they have any concerns about the services they're getting, they can directly reach out to us and get individualized support. So we'll make sure that you get that number as well. We also have a mandatory reporter training that is built with an equity lens, particularly for educators. So there's lots that the OCA does. We're just going to focus today on what the Center on Child Wellbeing and Trauma does. So Joy, you can go to the next slide. So this is all about the center itself. We were established in 2021. We are fully state funded and extremely proud that the state has invested in this work. We grew out of the Childhood Trauma Task Force that really started its work in saying that there needed to be an entity at the state level that provided evidence-based best practice work on how to be trauma responsive to children. We know that children across the state experience trauma. We know that children of strategically marginalized populations experience higher rates of adverse childhood experiences, which can become linked with trauma. And so we exist to try to provide training and technical assistance for state agencies and their contracted partners. We've listed some of the work, and some of you all may actually be in our academy. One of them is called TREE, the Trauma and Racial Equity Empowerment Academy, that has participants from 13 child serving agencies. For those of you all who haven't heard about it, we're about to launch Cadre 2, the next group of it. So if you're interested in that, please be in touch with us if you would like to join and learn a little bit more about that. We work with every state agency that comes to us, and you see them all listed, and have particularly focused in the last year on developing services for newcomers, vulnerable populations, and strategically marginalized populations. Next slide. Everything we do is grounded in these 5 guiding principles. This is the framework that was developed originally by SAMHSA and then modified by the Childhood Trauma Task Force in the state to be more focused on the needs of children and responding to childhood trauma. I'm not going to have the time, sadly, to go through all of this. That's a little bit beyond what we have time to do today. But I did want to put them up here because I think that if we all used as a state these basic guiding principles and how we worked with children, psychological and physical safety, grounding our interactions with children in transparency and trust, allowing children and families to have voice and choice in how they interact with our systems, doing everything we do with an anti-bias lens and promoting healthy relationships, then I think all of us would benefit, and certainly children who have experienced trauma would. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to someone who has been the absolute best partner we could have ever hoped for. Aimee Smith-Zeoli reached out from EEC, and we started plotting. And probably Aimee and I should not be allowed on calls together because we were like, what about this? What about that? And it grew hugely from there. So she's going to take it away for the next slide and talk a little bit about street in depth.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Audrey. And thank you so much for having us this morning. So as Audrey said, my name is Aimee Smith-Zeoli, and I'm the Special Education Support Specialist at EEC. And I also get to lead up our brand new behavioral health team, which I can talk about a little bit more. Actually, I will be talking about it a little bit more later on in this month, I think, right, Aimee? So but just wanted to ground us all in the partnership here and being able to address the need of the field to have trauma responsive resources in early education and care. It is no surprise to anyone of the extensive need around in our field for behavioral and mental health supports. And so we really needed to be able to address that both within our own system of supports and figure out how are we going to get these supports out to the field in a very meaningful way. And so we wanted to be able to create things that were building on each other in terms of those trainings. We didn't want this to become sort of a one and done, but just the beginning of something really fantastic. And so we started thinking about how we were able to offer these opportunities out to the field. How are we able to serve children with behaviors that challenge, and how do we address not using exclusionary discipline, right? If you've ever been in a room with me, you know that's something that always bubbles to the top. How are we thinking about that? How are we having that hard conversation around exclusionary discipline? And what can we offer to educators who are doing the impossible job of trying to, manage classrooms and be able to support children with really lots of behaviors that challenge. And so in order for us to be able to do that, we also needed to address what are we doing behind the scenes at EEC? How are we offering this information to our own staff, to our own field operations folks like licensors and our CFCE folks who are absolutely everywhere. And so we wanted to be able to develop something that would build on each other. And you can go to the next slide, Joy. And so this is where we are today. So this is the very beginning of our Street Week. And so we are launching these, we were talking about a lot of these trainings this week, although some of them have already launched. And so what Street is made up of is several different opportunities for training, different opportunities so that folks can become more aware of those 5 guiding principles. And so what we've developed is we've developed an opportunity for our field staff, licensors, investigators, our CFCE folks, really anyone who works at EEC. We just finished up 2 opportunities for folks to take part in a day-long training with Audrey and team around those guiding principles and how we can look at ourselves and the works that we do and become more trauma aware and start being of service to our children and families with that lens. We have another series that starts tomorrow, which is our core champion Train the Trainer series that will begin tomorrow in our Worcester office. And so we've had lots of interest, actually over 100 applicants. And we will start with our first cadre tomorrow. And that will be a series that will go through till April. And that is a much deeper dive into the 5 guiding principles and trauma-informed and responsive care. Those folks, those core champion folks will then be sort of tasks with then offering additional training opportunities within their own regions. And so educators that are interested in taking a bit more of a deeper dive will be able to do that in late spring. Before they're able to do that, they can log on to our LMS and they can take our modules that were developed very closely with the OCA expertise. And they are very focused on early childhood educators and the work that they do day to day. So you can get on the LMS and take those the core modules and sort of start with that foundation of knowledge around trauma-informed care. And then we have, as a result of all of this, we're hoping to then create additional communities of practice so that folks can be able to continue to have opportunities to talk about their work, talk about how this applies to the work that they're doing, and be able to have conversations in a reflective practice manner so that they can figure out what they do with all of this information then. How can we be supportive of one another, and how can we continue to do this work? And to be able to give us feedback around, okay, what's the next best step for us? What else can we help develop for you? What can myself and Audrey and team, what can we dream up next and be able to offer you? For Audrey and I, that would require lots of swag. And we were talking about hoodies this morning. So don't be surprised if that comes next. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Joy now to talk a little bit more in depth about those training opportunities.
Great. Thank you, Aimee.
You bet.
So yes, I'm going to sort of go through relatively quickly everything that Aimee just outlined at a little bit of a more granular level. My name is Joy Cohen, and I am a Deputy Director at the Center on Child Wellbeing and Trauma. It's very nice to be here. So thank you, Aimee, for having us.
And Joy, just a little bit about you. We'll hear more about Aimee when she comes back. But what about you? Where were you before this?
Before this, I was the Director of Policy at EEC. So I see a lot of friendly faces. It's really nice to see you. And just as central to my work in general, I was an educator before that. So always really child-facing and child-centered in all of the work that I do. So that's kind of what brings me here. Thank you. So the training in the LMS, as Audrey mentioned, is structured around our 5 guiding principles. So there are 6 modules. One is focused on trauma and resilience, and the other 5 are focused on each of the guiding principles. And it's the opportunity to gain awareness and to gain a little bit of insight into what is trauma, what are the effects of trauma, and kind of get your feet wet, so to speak, in understanding the universe. But then for folks who want to take it a little deeper, we have a secondary curriculum that allows for participants to really take the knowledge that they gained in the LMS and apply it to the work that they're doing with children and families in their program. So the deeper dives is really about the opportunity to bring theory to practice and identify some strategies that can be used. It goes a little bit deeper into the effects of trauma and how trauma impacts children. And it's a great curriculum. In order to operationalize that curriculum, of course, we need our professional development support specialists. And so we are looking to a phenomenal cohort of professionals to lead us in training early childhood educators on the deeper dives curriculum. And that starts in less than 24 hours. So we're very, very, very excited for that opportunity. And Core Champions will be together for 8 modules. Again, 6 of those are focused on them actually taking the deeper dive curriculum, but then they're kind of bookended between training of trainer modules that will really get at the facilitation skills and how to make meaning around facilitating content around trauma and equity and racial trauma and some other sensitive topics. And then, as Aimee mentioned, we had the opportunity to train some really, really phenomenal dedicated EEC staff, particularly licensors and investigators. We were able to customize some learning opportunities for them to make meaning around how trauma shapes behavior. We talked about implicit bias. We talked about equity, and it was a tremendous 2 days of learning. And as I hope you can see, is we're starting to put sort of puzzle pieces together to see ultimately systems change. And that's really the opportunity at hand. If you are interested in learning more about Street Week or the other opportunities that EEC has in terms of their mental and behavioral health resources, please visit this website. It's a mass.gov/early childhood resources website that EEC is hosting for training opportunities. Registration links are there for the trainings that we talked about and a whole lot more. And then, of course, please visit us at the Center on Child Wellbeing and Trauma if you want to learn more about what we do or find other resources around childhood trauma and special resources that are sort of centered around different roles. So you can look for, if you're an early childhood educator, resources that are relevant to your role. And I think that's it. We'll include our emails in this deck that we share in case anyone has any follow-up questions. And I think I'll pass it back to you, Aimee.
Great. Thanks so much. Thank you for all the resources in the chat. And Kate Warren Barnes wonders, in addition to this important trauma-informed resources, do you see any opportunities in the future to incorporate healing-centered approaches in your work to address childhood trauma? And then adds a link.
So I was one of the people that hearted that, Kate. So great suggestion. We actually love the work of Dr. Ginwright. He is one of my personal heroes, and I think he's been a real leader in the field for TREE, which is the partnership that we started with the Department of Youth Services that now has work with 13 different agencies. We are providing as a resource his 4 Pivots books and starting to build our next series of that related to some of the work that is in the 4 Pivots. So absolutely believe in it strongly. And I cannot think of a time in my lifetime where healing centered was not was as important as it is right now. So thank you for flagging that.
And then Joy Tom, glad to see you, EEC alum. Edna wonders, are you going to be able to offer this training again? You mentioned there was a lot of interest.
Yes, we are going to offer field trainings going forward, and we will also offer, so the core Train the Trainer series that is beginning, as Joy said, she's probably looking at her watch within the next 24 hours. We did that through application process so we could really understand who was in the room and what skills they were already bringing so that we could train at the right level so that it could be most beneficial to the folks that were in the room. There will be another series following up on that in the spring. So there will be more to come on all of that. Maybe we'll get really lucky and Aimee will let us come back and present it again.
We'd be glad to have you. Can you talk a little bit about kind of this partnership of the Office of Child Advocate and EEC working together and kind of what are some lessons learned? And we've been talking a lot about not duplicating, but amplify. So can you tell us how that's kind of coming into play in your work?
So I'll tell you a story that I told at the EEC board meeting. So I know several of you have heard it, but when we moved over to the Office of the Child Advocate, we met with all of the commissioners, and most of the commissioners said, great, we'd love to work with you. We'll figure it out. And, went from there. Commissioner Kershaw showed up with a list this long, like, you need to do this, you need to do this. And within days, we had outreach from Aimee Smith-Zeoli and Arjun from EEC and Kayla from EEC saying, great. And we learned pretty early on that if there's a call that is between Aimee, Kayla, and I, things are going to happen. We were throwing out ideas left and right. We then pulled in Joy, who we stole from EEC, but I now realize it was all just a plot to get her over to our side so she could do even more work for EEC. And then my team members, I see Kendall and John and Juan and Melinda. Those are just the folks, and Kelly. Everybody kind of came together. So Aimee, Kyla, you're welcome to hop in to answer that as well. But I think the really unique thing is that we all had one goal, which is what will be most useful for that teacher that day that a kid is really dysregulated. How can we help the teacher who may be feeling dysregulated? How can we help the kid? And that made it really able to move forward because we had that shared goal.
I'll add that Aditi shares such exciting work. I thank you so much, EEC and OCA. I would also like to name that these amazing relationship-based trainings will also count toward the Mass AMH endorsement credential for educators who might be interested in seeking the credential. And as I said, to see over 100 people join us on this Monday morning was just incredible. Aimee or Joy, any last words here at 9:57?
Just would encourage folks to check out either one of our websites where we talk a little bit more about some of the events of Street Week. For folks that want to join us, there's a couple different lunch and learns that are happening on Thursday and Friday, and they can find that info on the website. Where we'll talk not only again about the street initiative and how folks can become involved with that training, but also a little bit more about our newly developed behavioral health team. So obviously that all falls under the same umbrella. So happy to be there with the OCA team to talk a little bit more in depth about that, and would be happy to have you all join us. And we're sort of, this is like our spirit week for trauma-informed care. So we're just super excited to be able to offer more information to folks and really get feedback around what would be helpful, because that was one of the things, as Audrey said, that really did ground us. We wanted it to be most meaningful to educators who are in the classroom and doing their best to try and manage, supporting kids within their care. And so happy to hear your thoughts about what could happen, how we can expand this in the future. So.
Well, and on that note, Ann Candelas, a new board member at Strategies for Children, Ann shares, we've implemented a trauma-informed and responsive training tool for coaches, case managers in the workforce development space. We hope to address trauma-informed response in the workplace with employers. Would love to know more about how we might influence TIR in the workplace. So that sounds like another potential collaboration and learning opportunity. And thank you, Aditi, for putting that link in chat. And thank you, Neri, for putting way at the start of chat is the RSVP for the webinar with Strategies for Children and Neighborhood Villages to kind of go through the fiscal year 26 budget. Remember, that is just a proposal. It's the first step in our state budget process, but so that will be a chance for folks to talk. And we're so excited. Aimee, maybe in the last minute, just tell us, how new is the behavioral health team at EEC? I mean, don't spill all the beans that you'll share with us in the call, but just give us a little bit more
No,
context.
yeah, happy to, Aimee. So I have been with EEC almost a little over 2 years now. And so, and then we have since hired 3 other behavioral health specialists to be able to join us. So I would say within the last year or so, the last year, we've been able to welcome our 3 other folks who are fantastic to be able to help us do this development work and really and discovery work, and how can we best serve educators that are out there. And so just the idea that we have all of this support from our colleagues and leadership, and that everyone is so excited to engage in partnership as we talk about behavioral and mental health for kids is really super exciting. So we're hoping that it's really just the beginning for us to be able to offer more and more support to educators.
Well, thank you to Aimee, to Audrey and Joy, and to everybody for all of your thoughts and suggestions in chat. As you saw, we will be back here tomorrow morning with former Strategies for Children intern Amanda Salient, who is now at First Children's Finance, and they have findings on the team's latest report on improving child care facilities with federal relief funding. So as we log off, please show some appreciation in the chat for our folks who presented today, and we will see everybody tomorrow morning at the 9:30 call. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.